Good morning, everyone, and good morning to those of you online who are joining us this morning. My name is John. Welcome to our Sunday morning class with Guy here at the Life of Learning Foundation. I'm here in the main classroom with some other students, and we're glad that you're joining us for our session this morning. If you're new, our agenda for these sessions is that in a moment, Guy will give about a 60-minute talk on the topic that you see below you on the screen. And then when he's through, we take a short break and then come back for part two of our session, which is an open discussion, where students here in the classroom and those of you online, you have an opportunity to talk to Guy and to ask questions about the material he's presented today. So that part of the class will last up until about 11 o'clock, and then we will, as we like to say, keep the cameras rolling and have a little extra time for the students here in the classroom with me to share even more insights, and we invite you and encourage you to stay with us for that as well. So a full morning, and we hope you'll stay for all of it. During the broadcast, again, you can communicate with us. You can write comments or questions that you wish addressed to Guy. They will come to the host, Kate, and she will relay them to Guy throughout the broadcast. And you can also use that same tool to talk to us if you have any technical issues as well. And that is the way you can communicate and share things with us throughout our class today. With that, I think we're ready to get started. Guy, would you like me to read the topic and/or key lesson?
And/or.
And/or. Okay. I will do that. Here is our topic this morning, everyone. How to let go and enter the divine flow of life. And here is the key lesson. Thought is a stoppage. It is an impediment in the celestial circulation of new impressions created to refresh the consciousness in which they appear.
Read it one more time.
Thought is a stoppage. It is an impediment in the celestial circulation of new impressions created to refresh the consciousness in which they appear.
Good morning. How many of you are the incarnation of stoppage? Welcome, those of you who are joining us online. I hope that you will, as best you can, put aside any superfluous actions and sit for as long as you can and give your full attention to what we're going to study together today. I'm probably going to bring you in a little bit like I do on Wednesday nights when we have our discovery, just to cement certain parts of the lesson, but assuming I do, you'll be invited, and we'll do that briefly. But otherwise, I intend to present a fairly, in one respect, simple lesson this morning, but a simple lesson with incredibly long-reaching, profound, actually, implications with regards to the possibility of you, and I could say it in a host of different ways, of you being liberated from the captivity of your day-to-day thoughts and feelings, the limitations inherent in being identified with them, but more importantly, the possibility of you discovering that there actually is a divine flow to life. I think I'll cover it in more depth on Wednesday night as part of our discovery process. But for now, let's get started with a kind of a simple question, and I'll pose it to you. I won't take hands at this point, but I just would ask you to ask yourself, how is it possible that, as St. Paul would have said, how is it possible that I don't do the good that I would, but rather the evil that I would not? How is that possible? Now, the language in those days was complex, but here's what he was saying, and here's what I'm asking you to ask yourself. How is it that most of the time, without any awareness of the fact that I'm doing it, had I that awareness, I wouldn't do what I've just done? If I was aware that I was about to hurt you, I wouldn't do it. If I was aware that I was about to be seized by some fear or anxiety causing me to rush, I certainly wouldn't let myself be possessed by that thought that stops the whole world and sets me off in a race to try to escape what it has projected as a pain or a problem to come. I wouldn't do it. Yes or no? I would not do it. And ideally, because most of you, and I trust that many of you joining us, if you've not been with us before to study some of the insights that we do, I trust that you realize that, you know what, I'm beginning to have some awareness of this tendency of mine. Yes? And yet, in spite of the awareness of myself, I still find myself pretty much all the time doing the very thing that I know I wouldn't do if I had been present to the part of me that was about to pop off or punish or otherwise pursue what it did. Yes or no? So what is that about? This is a really critical question and not a complicated one. What is this absence of awareness? What is this will that comes in and takes me with it? Because I cannot do anything other than what my will says is needful of doing. And so I need to put together this idea that I don't do the good that I would, because in those moments I am under the influence of a will that not only thinks it knows what is good, but what it calls good isn't good for me or anyone else at all. Are we setting the stage properly? And then when I do the things that I would not knowing that I would not do it if I was aware of myself, what follows that? What do you do after you do the thing that maybe you're aware of now that you shouldn't do at all? That biting comment, rushing, blaming. What happens inside of you after you do the will of that particular little I? What happens inside? It was a mishmash of words, which is pretty much what happens in the head. But by and large, judge myself, find some excuse to rationalize why it is that I acted the way that I did, and then, of course, make new plans to never again be that person who acted against himself, herself, or anyone else. Are we all on the same page? What in the name of God is going on that we could be taken over so thoroughly and literally, if you're following me, rendered blind? If I could see what I was going to do, if I was aware of the will that was about to use my life to act out what it says is good, if I could see that, would I do it? Would I be unkind if I were capable of seeing that something in me is telling me, boy, you've got to protect yourself here, you've got to make sure that person understands their place, and therefore it is mandatory that you speak or do or act whatever it is that comes next. Yay? What's going on? One of the problems, and I won't linger on this too long because I have too much to share with you. One of the problems is that, respectfully, you're not at all stunned by whatever self it is that speaks for you when it is cruel. You're not at all shocked by the fact that you've told yourself you're going to slow down. And you can't. You're not at all surprised at the fact that in spite of what you know is true, you revisit the past, you're dragged through it, something seizes you. It doesn't shock you at all that at the drop of a hat, the whole of your life becomes the life of someone inside of you that you don't know is there until it seizes you with what it seizes you with. This is why the real work is difficulty, is difficult. What do you think blessed are the poor in spirit means? It means I'm beginning to understand that I was wealthy with these ideas, these images. I was wealthy with these parts of myself that felt so powerful when I was busy making sure that someone understood where they misstepped. All of that begins to fall apart like yesterday's newspaper when you start to realize that the things that you say you do, the things that you claim and then ultimately regret for having committed yourself to, those things aren't you at all. Not one of them are you. That's difficult to grasp, isn't it? That at the drop of a hat, something can take place, and when it takes place, it never dawns on me. I never ask myself this question. You might want to write the question down because we're going to drill into it. How in the name of God is it possible for me to act against myself? How in the name of God is it possible, especially if I have any love of what is divine and true, how can I act against another human being? And do you understand that when you pout, you shout, you blame, you push, you shove, that in every last one of those moments where you're rushing, you're not only punishing yourself, but you're a punishment to everybody who lays their eyes on you. Do you understand that? How is that possible? I wish I could, somehow or other, like some strange magician, take that thought and that energy and fold it into some little ball and then throw it, and it would go right into you and it would sit there radiating, so that every moment of your life when you got ready to be, when you were being taken over by something, you would sit there and you would actually realize, wait a minute, something in me is urging me to act against myself. Something's telling me rush. Something's telling me be angry. Something's telling me you should be resentful here and you better take proper action to make sure that person never does that to you again. You should feel sorry for yourself right now. To look at what happened to you, you poor person, oh my God, look at your face. What's happening to your face? Do you not hear those voices? Now, some of you are, unfortunately, and I'm going to use this word carefully, disbelievers. You can sit here and maybe just for the sake of comfort acknowledge that it's true, I do act against myself. But the real question has to be, how can I act against myself unless in that moment I'm not myself at all? The last thing that anyone would ask, because the whole of my life is predicated on achieving certainty about myself, isn't it? Why do I have the ambition that I do? Why do I pursue the appearance that I cultivate? Why are any of the things that I do the majority of my life other than at all costs I want to assure myself that I am the self that I need to assure, which, by the way, if you could see how ludicrous that was. I need to assure myself that I am the self I'm assuring myself to be. But do you ever think to yourself when you're busy acting out or preparing or rushing that you're assuring yourself of who you are? No, because why? Because I'm on the other side of that I. I'm busy trying to figure out how do I keep everything in place so that this particular moment and the sense of myself that's risen in it, that it's real. Because at all costs, man, I gotta be real. Yay? Yay. Now, what evidence is there that our identity, back to the question, unless it's possible that I am not myself in these moments when I am negative, unless it's possible that I'm not that self, in spite of how sure I am that I am that self, what evidence is there that it's possible for me not to be myself? Do you understand the question? I was thinking about kids. What's the matter with kids today? It's an old song none of you know. Brings up another old song. What kind of fool am I? Have you ever acted foolishly? Now there's a certain behavioral modification tool. That's a BMT. That we all are aware of and that we use not just on kids, but that we use on each other. What is the BMT? Behavioral modification tool. Here's a kid. And what does mom and dad do when the kid's like that? Chocolate, ice cream, anything to snap the child out of what? Out of the identity that they're manifesting in that moment. An identity that was manifesting itself due to any host of possible conditions. But usually it's set off by a brother or a sister or being denied something that they want. And because the adult can't stand, not that the child's suffering, but the adult's suffering because the child's manifesting that kind of violence and conflict, child can't help itself. So what does the adult do? I'm going to shift you out of that identity into another one. Now, you can see that with kids, can't you? Yeah, well, what about who and what we, do you think we outgrew that? That was done to us all the time. And we grow up thinking somehow that's changed. Do you not know, have you ever studied, it's a whole talk in itself we should do on a Wednesday night, how you, without any awareness of it at all, I might add, we call that being clever, are able to modify the behavior of the person you're with because their behavior is displeasing or punishing to you. Do you understand what I'm talking about? You know, make a funny face. Let's go do something fun. Make a plan. Give them this very serious look to let them know that they're treading on dangerous ground. Go silent. We, listen, have our identity seized by something that was seized by the behavior of someone else. Do you see that? You're acting this way. I wasn't thinking about suddenly I have to be defensive. But the minute that you act out this, now up in me comes a certain I, what we're going to call a little I, some little part of myself that in that split second knows that it needs to respond to that identity with something that either correlates to it or that challenges it, one or the other. And that's all that we know to do when it comes to these relationships. So when I do that, in quotes, am I the one that is doing that, or am I the one who becomes the I that does that? That's the question. Which is it? Yeah, I'm the one who becomes the I. So that I am no longer myself in that moment at all. Even though I may be thinking to myself how incredibly clever it is that you're able to manipulate this situation so that you can come out looking like you're right and they know they're wrong, or that we can just make some kind of compromise so I can get past what you're like right now and get on with my life, which is what most human beings do. So what's the point of the first part of this talk? We are, without knowing it, moved incessantly from one little I into another temporary sense of self. All the time, move from one little I, which is a temporary sense of self, you understand that? To another sense of self with almost every shift in prevailing conditions, because that's what you do to a child. Child is responding with pain or fear or crying because of the prevailing condition. And then you know, but you don't really know it, it's all mechanical, you know that if you can change the condition the child's responding to, you'll change their consciousness. They'll never know that their I shifted from one that was wailing into one that's very happy with the ice cream. And you know that it's possible to do that to children. What you don't know is that is always being done to you without your awareness of it. Which is how it's possible, by the way, for me to act against myself. Because in that moment, I'm not myself at all. I'm one of a legion of different eyes, different parts of myself that sit down there in the darkness of myself with their commanding and demanding order of will until something happens. I may have mentioned this before, but that's how strong the impression was on me. Years ago when Patricia and I were living in Ojai, pretty sure it was in Ojai, we were developing the foundation there, and we often had to go shopping for things, including the fact that we were trying to make a little place for ourselves. So one day we were in Santa Paula, I believe, on the other side of Ojai, and we were in a building store, Yes, Miss Money Penny. We were in a building store, and we were walking out, and I know I was identified with what we were doing and how much we spent. And we walk outside, and I saw a hot dog stand. And immediately, I wanted a hot dog. For one thing, believing that the appetite for a hot dog in that moment was that I was actually hungry, when I can see now I wasn't hungry at all, but one of these little eyes that was trying to escape another little eye that was unhappy with having to be there and do that was looking for some immediate pleasure. So, like the kid, one identity was being exchanged for another. You can see that much, yeah? But as we're standing there waiting, a mom and a little boy are standing there, and she gives him a hot dog, one of these hot dogs. And he bites into the hot dog, and perhaps you know this move. He bites into the hot dog, and then he's going, which means what? Whoa, mother of pearl. And she's going, spit it out, honey, spit it out. I ain't spitting this out. Now, any sane human being would spit it out, right? Because you won't taste the hot dog for like 3 years after you burn the inside of your mouth. But he couldn't spit it out. Now, why couldn't he spit it out? Because the particular little eye in that moment was so dead set on the desire of satisfying itself that it ignored the appearance of every instinctual true eye telling him, get this out of your mouth, bro, you're destroying yourself. But he couldn't do it. Now, can you see that there are times when you take something into your heart and mind that if you were clear and aware of the fact that you took in that fear, that anger, that worry, you would spit it from your mouth on the spot. But do you? What do? I keep chewing. But it isn't I who is chewing, it is I who is being chewed on by another kind of I that I'm not aware of at all. I am, for all intents and purposes, being consumed in that moment and believing in the pleasure of it because it is so consoling and so habitual to me to be in that frame of I. Everybody understand that? Now, can you see that the experience of that kind of unwanted moment does not exist, it cannot exist, without what we're calling for right now, a little I that suddenly sees what it believes perhaps as a pending threat, or sees what it sees as the possible pleasure, and that little I and its sense of well-being, its security, absolutely depends upon keeping that relationship with what it's looking at in place, yes or no? This is a little sidebar, and it's well that you should pay particular attention to it, because I watch you all the time. You think that when you look at something and then start talking to yourself about it, endlessly distracted, all the time, the attention taken and placed on something, you believe that when that happens and the corresponding thoughts that appear as a result of you being distracted, you believe that's you. You don't see that your mind, some I that has some association to what your attention is drawn to, you don't see that you were drawn like a fox to a trap, and then when, as the mind will do, begins to, what's the word I want? Continue to mull over where you were distracted and what you were distracted to, you will eventually find yourself dragged into the ground. If nothing else, your energy will be stolen from you because all of it was vested in something that you thought you attended to. You never attended to anything that distracts you. You can see your attention being taken to it, but if you're aware of yourself, you can see that when your attention is taken to something, something has taken your attention to it. Do your attention lands on something by accident? Do you? Your attention is taken by something in you that places it there so that it can pull up the corresponding sense of self connected to that impression. That's why it goes there. And it's endless, isn't it? Because then you can just keep thinking about, in quotes, you can keep living out the next little set of eyes that are connected to that particular little eye that just keeps rolling and rolling until what happens? Till, like the child, an ice cream cone or a problem other than that condition appears, and then I've got the next thing to occupy myself throughout eternity. Do you see it, please? Now, if we ever wish to be free of what we can call reincarnating little eyes, do you understand? Reincarnating little eyes. What's a reincarnating little eye? It's some unconscious part of myself, some content of some memory, some impression, that when it sees something corresponding in the world, it's drawn to it to bring it out and confirm it as being me. And so every time that cycle takes place, that consciousness that holds this legion of identities, it's reincarnated, isn't it? And it never suspects that it's going through that, because every time it does that, the sensations are so strong and so clear and so defining that I can't wait to give myself, can you imagine? I can't wait to give myself over to a fear that promises me protection. Isn't that the most extraordinary thing? Now, there's something we need to see, building on what we're looking at. Are we building on what we're looking at? Yes. And there's no substitute for this. We're working into the heart of the material now. There is no possible negative reaction ever that we become captured by that isn't a manifestation of some familiar old sense of self. There is no negative reaction that you become identified with that doesn't belong to an old sense of self, an old memory, an old idea, an old image. And that when it appears, as soon as it appears, I'll give you an example. Write the word identity, but put a dash between the word I and identity. An identity. An instantaneous establishment of a familiar sense of self. The instantaneous establishment of a familiar sense of self that I didn't know was a familiar sense of self until the conditions triggered its rising up in my consciousness to do what? To become I. To become me. And the minute it becomes me, then is it not instantaneously brought into a place where, and we're getting ready now to introduce some new words. Don't bring them up yet. Where in that moment, there's no question in my mind, not just to who I am, but what I have to do to ensure that that I stays safe. Now, remember, we're talking about suddenly I am acting against myself. I get afraid, I get anxious, I get worried. When that condition triggers and up comes that little I in that split second, we can see sitting here, obviously I'm acting against myself if I go along with it. But when it appears, there's no awareness at all that I'm acting against myself, because lo and behold, I'm sure I'm acting in my own best interest. Please try to see the contradiction. When I'm negative, I believe I'm acting in my own best interests. That's insane. Isn't it? Because part of the negativity, part of that negative I, comes replete with all of the things that it says needs to be done so that I can stop being what I just agreed to become. So let's bring up what I'm calling a dark tag team in the unconscious corner of the mind. How many of you know what a tag team is in wrestling? Now, these are new words, and don't get ahead of me yet. Please, just listen first. These are new words that describe psychological conditions and the conflict that comes out of them. They are not to be memorized. They are meant to be words that you use to explore your own consciousness and the appearance in you of them. Because until you can be aware of, what's the first word up there? A grab-eye. A grab-eye is a false but commanding sense of self derived from having become identified with any emotional reaction, negative or otherwise. A grab-eye, a commanding sense of self derived from having become identified with any emotional reaction, negative or otherwise. In other words, a grab-eye is something that my experience of it is I'm seized by an eye. I mean, literally, did any of you ever see the movie with, I think it was Kevin Bacon and Michael Gross? It was an old film they made, like Tremors 1, 2, 3, and 4. It was called Tremors. Yes. Now, Tremors was the silliest movie in the world. It took place, the stars lived in this little sort of deserted town. There was a gas station and a cafe that got 2 people every 8 years passing through. They never tell you how they survive out there. And then one day, due to an earthquake or whatever, suddenly there are these massive, blind, subterranean sandworms with a taste for human beings. Now, they were blind, and the only way they knew where there was somebody to eat was if somebody made a noise on top of the surface of the ground. So if you were walking along and there was a graboid, they were called graboids. If there was a graboid anywhere near, that thing would come tunneling, and you see you see the dirt moving, and then suddenly it would come up, kind of like in Dune, the giant spice worms come up, but it wouldn't come up to get spice, it would come up to get the silly person who didn't know that if they knew they could just be still, they wouldn't attract the graboid. Now, I want to put the picture of the graboid in your mind so that you can start realizing that this grab-eye is very similar to the graboid. Because what's a grab-eye? What does it mean? I'm grabbed by an eye. But the problem is I don't know I'm grabbed by an eye. Because the eye that's grabbed is attended to by, second new word, stimuli. S-T-I-M-U-L-I-E. Stimuli. The continuous waves of mounting associated thoughts and feelings that justify the continuation of the appearance of the grab-eye. Continuing the sense of my identity produced when that moment of reaction seized me. Are you putting this together at all in your mind? Grab-eye. I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio. I need somebody with some slow hands, or we've only just begun. And yes or no, you don't see it. A graboid, a grab-eye comes right out of the bottom of the chair of your car and goes. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. It's more serious than that. And I'm sucked into an identity that was waiting in the darkness of my consciousness that I had no idea existed. And when it appears, I still don't know it exists because now I am it. And it is kept in place by the stimuli, the wave of associations and all the other material that justifies the reason that I'm so angry or so afraid or so resentful. What are the 2 new words? Isn't it stimulating to be angry? Isn't it stimulating to think about what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day? Isn't it stimulating to revisit the past? Now, I revisit the past and I continue to do so, and every time I do, what calls me back into the past? No, Pat said the past. No, what calls me back into the past is the part of me that never died there, that continues to live at the expense of the consciousness that it takes over every time some condition comes along and either reminds me of what took place that still needs to be fixed, or how I didn't act right in that moment and now I need to. So here I am, I'm seized by a memory. When I'm seized by a memory, is there a me that's seized by the memory, or is there a memory that has become me? The latter, isn't it? I've become the memory. Oh my God. And when I become the memory, I become the emotional content of that experience that's trying to escape itself. And how does it escape itself, the memory? This is what's so amazing to see if you can see it. How does the pain of the memory try to escape itself? Revisit itself again. Just try to move around. Just try to move around some of the characters on that conflict board so that if you can move them around sufficiently enough, there'll be a new game. But there can't be a game on the board of conflict produced by the grab eye, because the grab eye is producing all the characters on the board. And all of the movement, all of thoughts, activity, isn't it true when you're grabbed by something? Does the mind get nice and quiet and still when you're grabbed by something? Or what happens to the mind when that happens? Come on, what happens? I'm moving pieces around. And every piece I move is a different board, seemingly, requiring a new analysis of the place of those parts in order to make sure that when everything is done, I can knock over your king and become queen of whatever it is that I'm trying to become. It's unbelievable. So, you have the idea of how is it that I'm not myself in that moment now? I'm not myself because I've become some surreptitious sense of self that has been sucked out of the darkness of this unconscious mind into an active role. And the only way that part of me that does the good, does the evil I would not, the only way that can become active is that I have to become passive to its appearance in me. And the more passive I am to its appearance, the more likely I am to be pushed around by everything, listen, that resists the appearance of itself. Isn't that what you do? When something comes up and it grabs you and it's painful, do you go, oh, this is great, let me study this? Or, oh my God, this is terrible, how do I stop this? So the very consciousness that brings up the suffering then says, I shouldn't be suffering. That's the stimuli. That's the thoughts and feelings that follow being seized by any one of these particular grab eyes. Now, to be clear, no grab eye, no momentary, and that's a key word, no momentary identity. Isn't the child that's crying caught up in hasn't the child been a grabbed eye, yes or no? And then when the child's distracted from what grabbed it, then that moment you can see, obviously that's just a temporary identity, yes or no? What's wrong with you, kid? It's a temporary identity. Go tell somebody that's negative, what's wrong with you? That's a temporary identity. They'll go, I'll show you a temporary identity. And you'll bring up another grab eye, won't you? Meaning what? They'll be grabbed by now that's something defensive or resentful. This is why you waste your time when you try to pull people out of their states. Because you wouldn't be trying to pull someone out of a state unless you'd been grabbed by resistance to it. And then that resisting eye, that grab eye, just gets involved with another grab eye. And what happens when you get two grab eyes together? Never mind, I've got a host of witty comments that I'm not going to make. Basically what happens is you have the war of grab eye. One identity fighting with another identity for what? To secure its sense of being superior to the grab eye that it's fighting with. Is one grab eye superior to another? Is it? I'm trying to put in your mind all of these various ways in which you can begin to understand, sweet God, I'm aware of something trying to seize me. See, that's the problem, isn't it? I don't know that I'm being grabbed. Isn't that the problem? But if I don't know I'm being grabbed, and I am indeed grabbed by a particular I, then I become the instrument. I incarnate once again that I. What chance do I have? What chance do I have unless I can be aware of it? None. None. I'll just float through this life, and whatever comes afterward, reincarnating and reincarnating over and over again, the same consciousness that every other human being on this planet lives with. The only difference being is that you have a certain set of eyes based on your culture, your conditioning, your environment, and I have a certain set of eyes. Some of us have very poor eyes, meaning I was raised in poverty, I've got to get this. Others raised in influence, I'm superior. It doesn't matter. That's the point of all this. The grab eye, the thing, the I doesn't matter. They're all temporary. They're all temporary. They're dragged out of this consciousness by the condition that corresponds to their content. And until you're aware of that taking place, you are always what? You become the grab eye. All right, let's do a little bit of work together before we get to the exercise. What would be some of the, what are we looking for? What I want to know is, how do I know that I've been seized by a grab eye, or I'm about to be seized by a temporary identity? Let's establish that. The identity is only as temporary as are the stimuli. You bring an end to the stimuli, the associations, the reasons for the negativity. In that moment, what is that negative I going to stand on? It has nothing to stand on. So what are some of the signs in the movie Tremors? You always saw in the distance the dirt moving as the giant sandworm was approaching you. What would be the corresponding way in which we would know that we have just attracted a grab eye? What attracts the grab eye? Okay, let's run through the list. What are some of the signs, to use those words, that you're either about to become captured, seized by a grab eye, or that one's on there? What are some of the signs? Chris?
An emotional reaction to something.
Basically, any emotional reaction to anything. Eric?
Feeling of pressure.
Yeah. Boy, there's I am warning pressure under content. I am stressed to the max. And by the way, the minute that you feel stressed to the max, how much room is there in you for any other addition to your life, right? Terry? Anxious. If I'm anxious, I am in the hands of a grab eye. Leah? Judgment is the perfect way in which the grab eye begins to make sure that it can't be challenged, because all grab eyes are superior to the condition that they're in. Patricia? Desire. Every unconscious desire that brings forth what I want, the I want is a grab eye, isn't it? Barbara?
Somebody says something that threatens my image.
Oh, Doug, stop it. Anyone that even assumes that they can question my appearance, my image, brings up what inside of me? Defensiveness. Isn't if I'm defensive, aren't I in the hands of a grab eye? What am I trying to do here? I'm going to get some more. What am I trying to do here with you right now? I want you to be able to start correlating the experience of your own consciousness to what seizes you in your consciousness, so that the awareness of these things begins to become a trigger by which I know, you know what, I've been seized. Because it's true, I have been seized. And I don't want to justify acting against myself or you. I want to see the material, the mechanics that produces the grab eye. There was Ellen. Confusion. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And by the way, when you're in the hands of in the maw, how many of you know what a maw is? When you're in the maw of a grab eye, how much room is there to navigate? Is there anything you can do except be swallowed by it and then hate the fact that you're being swallowed? I saw a hand in the back. No? All right, a couple more. Wayne. Tension, of course. Tension is dead giveaway. Rushing. The only way that you rush is that you are in the hands of a grab eye that is producing all the stimuli it needs in order to keep you in that. Remember we talked about insight timer momentum? momentum that you are being carried along by a grabby. Yes.
Not being able to control.
Not being able to.
Control?
Yeah. Yeah. Feeling like I've got to control this. That's a definitive sign of a grabby. And by the way, when you're trying to control something, the I that is trying to control that condition, did it appear until the condition came that needed to be controlled? So the condition and the grabby are corresponding relationship, aren't they? Every grabby, every condition are codependent. They do not exist without another. So that my belief, for instance, that I have to control the condition is the strength of the grabby that appears in that moment. Everybody following me? These words will leave you. What I don't want you to lose is the feeling of the ability to recognize, I now start to understand. I'm getting depressed. How can I sit and if I'm getting depressed, does it not feel like I'm doing this for my own benefit because I'm such a terrible person, but really I'm a good person who shouldn't be going through this? Yes or no? That's a grabby. Can I begin in my life on a daily basis to recognize how many times I am, and I love the word, we can use the word seized. Everybody understand the word seized? Less attractive, swallowed by. If I'm swallowed by a particular identity that continues to affirm and confirm the reason for me to be in that state, what chances do I have in that state other than what that state and that I are telling me I need to do in order to escape what just swallowed me? Does a shark want to spit up the human being that it just swallowed? Does it? Then why in the name of God do you think the part of you that's telling you get rid of this actually wants to get rid of it? All right, that was pretty good. We built a good list. And some came on the board here. Claudia, suddenly anxious, defensive, yes. Deep anger. Yeah, Tony, I love you. It's not enough just to have anger, but it's deep anger. One of the grabbies that we didn't bring up is I am special. You go into a restaurant, you don't get the service you want on the spot. It may look like you're sitting there, but it's a giant sandworm in your chair. Isn't it? Well, aren't you being consumed in that moment by some I that has already determined you're never to be treated that way? Because I'm special. So I and the word special don't exist until someone treats you in a way that isn't special, and the condition brings out of the consciousness the grabby, and then what? Then the stimuli, which is all of the ways in which I sit and think through how I've been in places like this before, and I never get what I deserve. You're getting exactly what you deserve in that moment because you've asked for it. But you don't know you've asked for it. That's the trick, isn't it? That's the whole purpose of this talk. So let's begin the exercise portion of the talk, which is, what do you think it is? Didn't we just go through it? Well, you won't be, but one day you will. Without effort, by the way. I'm on high alert for the appearance of any grabby. Because I know they're there. You see, in the movie Tremors, all these movies, even a really stupid B horror movie like that, as opposed to Jaws, which was a stupid A horror movie, all of these movies are predicated on certain archetypes. Things that come up from underneath the earth, from under the dark waters. To do what? The body snatchers. To do what? To steal my life, to take my life from me. And here I am, a human being, so asleep, I agree to have my life taken from me. I make the noise, meaning I get caught up in the reaction, identify with it, so that the grabby will come and get me. And then I participate in the justification of my own destruction. Tell me that's not crazy. Don't tell me that. Exercise. Watch for the appearance of the grab eye with its stimuli. There will never be a grab eye that doesn't have a stimuli. And that stimuli, L-I-E, you understand why we're using that, right? The sensations produced by the appearance of that thing confirm the reason for its appearance. So the stimuli is all of the corresponding associations that come with every grab eye that tell you, look, this is vital, man. You cannot let this person get away with it. You have to stand up for your rights here. And you're being swallowed whole by something that's producing suffering in you. And as it produces the suffering, it's telling you what you have to do to stop it. So be aware of any thought or feeling that comes up and seizes you. That's a short way. Now, maybe you've never been aware of being seized by a thought or feeling. That's highly likely, I might add. Because when we have a reaction, identify with it, we don't think we're seized by that. But are we not seized by the identification with that reaction when it comes up? Of course we are. Because would I ever act out what that reaction is telling me to do? If I knew it was hurting me or you, would I do it? No. So I'm seized by an identification with the reaction, but I never know that's how this grab eye appears, is through the unconscious relationship that is already established in this consciousness between me and my reactions. For us, reactions are just part of the way in which we deal with problems. Yes or no? But using a reaction to deal with a problem is like using gasoline to put out a fire. All it does is enlarge and enhance the flames, the pain, the suffering. So, anytime that you're aware of that, your awareness of any grab eye, what do you think you are to do when you're aware of the grab eye? And God willing, see, this is down the stream. Right now, all I want you to do is just recognize I've been seized. But as you start to do that, your attention, your awareness will expand sufficiently that you'll actually start to realize, now I see the stimuli. Because first I'm just seized, I don't know it, because the stimuli buries it. Yes? But now I'm catching the grab eye, and it's extraordinary. Something that has produced this fear in me is now telling me why I need to be afraid. And why I need to be afraid is because some sense of security that I'm completely attached to and dependent on has been threatened by a condition. So the condition produces the sense of I that feels threatened, and then all I am is someone reacting and trying to stop or protect that, never suspecting that I'm in a loop where my own mind and my own past is justifying the punishment of having been seized by something that's acting against me that I never see it. And here's the amazing thing. Do you remember, I don't know when it was, a couple talks ago, I talked about this addict. It was a story. And the addict was telling his friend, he said, I can't believe that it's so painful to stop killing myself. Do you remember that? You will see that it's so painful not to be swallowed by a grab eye that you would rather be grabbed by the eye and then have your usual familiar life than to go into the unknown territory of actually recognizing, good God Almighty, this is not I. It can't be. And then with that understanding and whatever has been built into your spiritual memory to meet those moments and realize, you know what? I'm not going to say I to this. I'm not going to agree with this anger or this fear. I'm not going to go along with the crowd. What do you think a mob is? Of any kind. It's a gathering of sandworms. A gathering of human beings with no identity other than being carried along by the sudden surge of certain emotions that are connected to an object or a position that they're set against or for, and then all they are is they're grabbed by that identity. No awareness at all of what they're doing to themselves or anyone else in the world. How does it make sense to destroy the world because you don't like it? How does it make sense to destroy yourself because you don't like the condition you find yourself in? You're following the parallel. So your awareness of the grab eye requires what? This willingness to see and at least suspect for as long as you can its surreptitious nature. I have to at least be still enough to allow some awareness of what I have never been aware of before, and that this I is punishing. This I wants to punish. This I is not just the source of fear, but it validates everything it fears from its past. I must do that, including, to close this talk, the awareness of the flood of associations. You'll be stunned at how much this unconscious nature will drag out of itself to validate and justify you being overrun by a negative I. You'll be floored. There's nothing it won't stoop to. Oh, and by the way, there's nothing it won't stoop to when you want to control an I in another person. Is there? Aren't you grateful to learn this? But it's not enough to hear it. It's not enough to hear it. When do grab eyes appear? When is my identity taken over? When am I see? When does a grab eye appear? Anytime it wants. Because I come into this life with a certain karma, a certain set of experiences, my past, what I need to do as a human being. I come in and I'm loaded with all that, and every last one of those things can meet a condition that challenges my identification with it, can't it? And when anything challenges my identification through some unwanted condition, presto remco, grab eye. Just like that. Now, I don't want you to be paranoid. You're already paranoid. No, that's the truth, because now you're going to be... Don't look to the ground. Be grounded in the awareness that won't let you act against yourself. And then do it again and again and again and again and again. And I give you a promise. I don't usually do this. I give you a promise. You catch a grab eye. How many of you ever caught, in one way or another, a grab eye up till now? Most of us have, or we wouldn't be here. Because we realize, how can I keep acting against myself? I swear to God, I'm never going to be like that again. And then I'm grabbed by an eye that does it again. And then I judge myself and I hate myself, which is another grab eye, isn't it? And then I start to recognize, wait a minute, that which hates this and judges this is part of the thing that's hating and judging. Oh my God, well, who am I going to be? And when you no longer know who you are in that moment, because you've not been seized by any known identity, you're on the verge of discovering the truth of yourself and, to the purpose of the talk, how to be part of that divine flow. Because when you're grabbed by an I, are you in any form of flow at all? No, you're in a giant no, aren't you? Yeah. So something steals us, stops us, sinks us, and then blames the condition instead of realizing the consciousness responsible for that conflict. Let's take a break. We'll come back and have our Q&A.